everyone. I'm attorney Donna DiMaggio Berger, and this is Take It to the Board, where we speak condo and HOA. Today, we are going to be talking about the growing mental health crisis in many of our private residential communities with my guest, Christopher Ayoub. Chris serves as president of RealManage, a management company headquartered in Dallas, Texas, with locations throughout Texas, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Washington. RealManage has received the honor of being named Inc. 5000's list of the fastest growing private companies in America 4 times. Prior to joining RealManage, Chris was the CEO of Pavazo, a Fortune 500 real estate technology company. Chris graduated from the United States Air Force Academy in 2003 and flew over 60 combat missions during the Iraqi Freedom Campaign. He was named Top 40 Under 40 of North Texas in 2019. And a final tidbit, he competes in martial arts competitions. I could talk to Chris about a lot of different topics given his background, but the topic I'm most excited to discuss with him today is mental health. So, Chris, welcome to Take It to the Board.
Good to be here. Thanks, Donna.
Chris, I don't think there's any doubt that we are in the midst of a mental health crisis right now. We see it in some of the rage we've seen on our roadways, on airplanes, at school board meetings, in our workplaces, and in our community associations. There's much more public discussion about mental health issues today, but we still seem to have a long way to go before mental health checkups are as common as an annual physical. Well, the first thing I want to know from you is how and when did you become interested in the topic of mental health?
Being a veteran and especially a veteran during a time of multiple wars, right? It started being talked about probably not even like 15 years ago. If you were being evaluated for a top secret clearance, they would take a look to see if you had any mental health issues. And there was a stigma associated with having mental health, like it was a sign of weakness. And so a lot of folks would just say, right, it's old term, suck it up and keep going, suck it up and keep going. I fell into that. A lot of us fell into that. The whole I'm good, right? It's just part of the job, I'm good. And so for me, I started noticing the suicide rates going up and up and up. But you weren't hearing about people talking about, hey, I'm depressed, I feel lonely, I feel isolated, I'm in a world of hurt. The world's collapsing on me. I didn't see tears.
Chris, you mentioned in terms of the clearance, mental health is such a broad category. Can it be something, does that include things as just garden variety anxiety that they were looking for, or something more important like mental health issues?
What they were looking for is, would somebody crack under pressure and be a threat? They do a much better job now with all this mess going on in Afghanistan right now. I got a letter from the VA that said, hey, let's talk about it. I don't want you to think your blood, sweat, and tears we're gone to waste, right? We talk about PTSD. There's triggers associated with it. And there's triggers associated right now going off all place where people are like, what was I there for? Why? I'm very proud that the VA is proactively reaching out now and saying, hey, come talk to us about it. It's okay. They're not trying to hide this. No one's trying to hide it.
Are you seeing an evolution of sorts? I mean, for instance, I read an article that the armed services were using mindfulness techniques, meditation, things like that. The things that, my father served in the Korean War. I'm sure they never even uttered words like mindfulness and meditation. So are you seeing an evolution of sorts?
I am, but we got a long ways to go. We're not there yet.
Let me say, and I should have said at the outset, first of all, thank you for your service to our country.
My honor.
Very greatly appreciated. When we talk, those of us in the industry who've been in the community association industry for a long time, we will often refer to our war stories and having been in the trenches. Now I'm talking to somebody who is really in the trenches. Do these kind of wartime comparisons that people in stressful jobs use, do they open the door to a meaningful conversation with a real combat veteran like yourself in terms of how people can perform best in highly stressful situations? Or do you think, guys don't really refer to it that way?
I think it does open the door for more conversation. When we start talking about highly stressful situations or PTSD, right? PTSD is not directly just for people in the service. It's not isolated to that. There's a lot of folks who've had traumatic things happen in their lives. And it's important to know that we share that in common. Someone who's a veteran, someone who's not. People often think that you have to have been in the service to have PTSD. People tell me this all the time, and they've been through some crazy stuff in their life, and they'll be like, Chris, I haven't been what you've gone through. Everyone's different. and it's what it means to them. And so we have to understand that and respect that. And a lot of it is removing that stigma and being able to just be able to have conversations. So I think that we have to be able to be open with one another about it in a very respectful way.
I think that's great advice. They talk about big T trauma and small T trauma, but I think you're right. Depending on the person, trauma certainly doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel healthy. In my line of work as a community association attorney, it's a people relationship. So I'm not representing some, nameless, faceless corporation. I deal with the boards of directors. I deal with the managers. I hear the stories that tug at your heartstrings. There's also infuriating stories. And sometimes it's a lot of negative energy. I will leave a board meeting or a membership meeting and I will feel drained. Now, you've got a lot of different clients that are dealing with a lot of different problems. And as the attorney or even the manager, am I off base in thinking that sometimes I'm almost absorbing that kind of energy? And what do I do with it once I absorb it?
You do. And we have to be very aware in our world. There are a lot of folks that are energy vampires too. They will suck the energy right out of you and they'll just go from person to person, right? And it's a very I want to talk to you about what my problem is, but that person's not necessarily looking for a solution. They just want to vent to everybody. And you can't help someone who doesn't want to get help. You can show them unconditional love. You can help them by listening. But at some point, someone has to be able to say, there's some accountability here, and I'm going to work through trying to find a solution to this, because at the end of the day, they can't keep living like that, right? I mean, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no such thing as staying the same. And when you're in that ballpark, guess what? You're getting worse. You're heading down a pretty bad path quickly. What we have is energy. You get what you put out, right? And I'm a firm believer of positive energy. It attracts positive energy. You go around with people and they lift you up with their kind words and the gratitude and pleasant to be around. And I got to tell you, if you don't balance yourself out, you will end up with some serious mental health hurts as well, too.
And that's great advice when it's in your personal life, when you choose who you choose to surround yourself with, who you choose to go out with. I understand that. And I agree. Seeking out people who are positive, who have a healthy perspective on life. But what do you say to that manager who is in a community, an on-site manager, let's say, and has one or more toxic people in the community, and their recreational pastime is just hammering that manager, criticizing them, sending them harassing emails, harassing phone calls, popping into the association office, and just making that manager's life a living hell? What do you say to that person?
That's no way for them to have to live. No one deserves that. No one deserves to wake up every morning with a sick feeling in their stomach. No one should feel insecure in that way or unstable. So number one, set boundaries. You're a human being. Just because it's your job, it doesn't mean people can step all over you. Nowhere in your job description does it say that you're supposed to get stepped on and mistreated. Now, things do happen where people say things, but when you got someone who's targeting you, one, you need to let your supervisors know. You need to let your human resource department know also. You also need to let the board of directors know, because they are the ones who are ultimately responsible for that community. And then depending on the level of this, that attorney, like you, Donna, has to get involved. And, whether it's a cease and desist letter or whatever it is that comes out, something, but there has to be escalations. And if that manager needs to be removed from the property, then they need to be removed from the property. They shouldn't feel that feeling going into work every single day. No one deserves that.
Yeah. I said at the outset, Chris, that we're seeing an increase of rageful incidences. I'm dealing with no less than 5 situations right now that I just laid out for you, where we have an individual in the community who is targeting the manager. And we're doing what you're saying, suggested setting boundaries by creating certain rules, by giving the manager a framework. In some cases, we've had to terminate the open door policy in the association and set some boundaries in terms of that. The managers I deal with typically, Chris, they're well-meaning people who want to do their job and they want to be accessible to the vast majority of people in the community who have good intentions. Unfortunately, when you do have that heat-seeking missile on your back, sometimes you have to close up for a while at least. And that's what I explain to the managers is, look, I know you want to have that open door policy, but given what you're going through with this individual, for right now, it's safer mentally and physically to close off the office, require reservations, set some boundaries. And in some cases, I've even recommended having a security guard present.
I agree. You got to set boundaries and draw a line. Look, our managers aren't, there's no hazard duty, combat duty pay. They didn't take some oath of office to defend the Constitution. That's not what this is, right? They shouldn't feel like they're in a war zone every day, period.
They shouldn't, but unfortunately, some are living through that. So I wanted to ask you, given your focus on mental health, how has that shaped your philosophy at RealManage?
One is I like just talk openly about it. Like I see a mental health professional and I also see a physical fitness professional, right? Those two feed off of one another as well, too, mental and physical health. I have no shame in saying that. And so removing the stigma around it is one thing. And I openly talk about it. Two, often talking about you have to wake up with purpose. And sometimes that purpose changes, but you have to wake up with a little bit of purpose. And then another thing is too, is you have to love yourself. If you think your mental health's good and you don't love yourself, your mental health is not good, not even close. And a lot of that is rebuilding yourself from a dark place. And I've been in dark places before. I get it. You have to dig yourself out and you have to dig deep. I use this application called I Am, and I share it with my company. I tell everybody, use this application. It sends you affirmations throughout the day. I am strong. I'm courageous. I'm my own superhero. I am brilliant. I add value to everything I do in my life. Things like that, right? I am loved. I'm cared for. And it's amazing because you begin to believe what you say, right? I'm a firm believer that in this statement, and it's a quote. I didn't come up with the quote, but I've restated it numerous times. Your thoughts lead to your words lead to your actions lead to your character, and your character leads to your destiny. So it all starts with your thoughts.
Do you say those words out loud? Is that more impactful than just reading them and thinking them?
It is more impactful. It's more impactful, definitely. And you can start off by just, reading it to yourself, and then you need to do whatever you need to do, right? If it's look in the mirror and do it, if it's, voice record it, but you got to remind yourself of those things. And then also being grateful. Just naming 3 things you're grateful for instead of just talking about my life sucks and I hate my job and I hate the world. It's so hot outside and, you're constantly playing this victim mentality. You got to start saying, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the roof over my head. I mean, we live in a very entitled society. If you don't have an iPhone 13 or 12 or whatever edition we're on right now, like you're solely missing out on something. Have a roof over your head, food on the table. We're missing heavily on that gratitude thing. And so I share that often.
Listen, we're adults, so a lot has been programmed out of us, right, in terms of opening up our minds. Adults may think of that and say, that's hokey. That's hokey to say, I am strong or I am powerful or I am loved out loud. How do you get people past that kind of embarrassment factor or shame factor that I'm an adult, I shouldn't have to do these things?
If they're not willing to do that, they're never going to get better. That's part of the problem. It's hokey, it's corny, it's cheesy, it's annoying. That's what weak people do. As an adult, we have freedoms. Like that's an individual decision you have to make. So what can I do? I can be me and be the best version of me and be this example. And I'll bring that light to this world every single day. And there will be other people who are going to bring this light into this world every single day. You can continue to live in the darkness. Believe me, I've been there and it sucks.
I say try it. If you're people who know me well know I'm curious about a lot of stuff. So if you're not feeling great now, but you think it's a little hokey to recite a mantra, just try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But what have you lost?
Nothing.
So as you can imagine, the legal industry is also very stressful. There is a high suicide rate amongst attorneys, as you mentioned, managers as well. We've got a mental health crisis amongst our young adults right now who may feel hopeless. At Becker, at our law firm, we have an employee assistance program, which I think is great. We've also created a mental health committee to reach out. Are you offering similar type of resources for your managers, given the stressful situations they often work under?
I do monthly calls to my company, myself and Chris O'Neill. I'm the president of the company. He's the founder and CEO and chairman. And we'll have newsletters go out. We'll talk about mental health awareness. We'll also talk about the resources that they have access to. So the big thing is trying to remove the stigma from it. And the second is then providing the resources through our people experience department, HR, in order to get that out to folks.
That's so important. For anybody who's lost someone to suicide, you know how important it is to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. Chris, I've found that some of the toughest problems to solve as a lawyer involve mental health challenges in the community. It's not like resolving a contractual dispute or interpreting, a provision in the governing documents. These kind of mental health problems can be very time consuming. They can be costly. And often it's hard to figure out where the lines are drawn. I will tell you, some of my clients have dealt with residents who engaged in setting little fires on the catwalks, threatening fellow residents or the manager or the board members. In one case, I had a tenant, this is one of my worst case scenarios, who actually painted graffiti in his blood in the garage barrage.
Wow.
These can be very difficult to deal with. So what do you do when a manager reaches out and says somebody's acting crazy, for lack of a better word, in one of their communities?
One, you got to get an understanding for the context behind that statement. We throw that around way too much, right? Someone's acting crazy. Mm-hmm. One is understand the context of it. Two, our folks need to feel supported. Identify what the situation is, get the board involved, get the employee engaged with the people experience or HR department, see what kind of barriers and boundaries we can put into place there, escalating this through the supervisory chain, getting the board involved. And depending on how all that pans out and the severity of it, do we need to get a lawyer involved? And then depending on the severity of that, do we need to get law enforcement involved? If we continue to ignore things, they're only going to get worse. I mean, this isn't about a lack of grace in our hearts. This is about protecting people.
Including protecting the person with the issue, whether it's a drug. Sometimes it's drugs. Yeah. Sometimes it's an older person who's experiencing cognitive decline. Sometimes it's a younger person who may be having a bipolar episode. As you said, context is very, very important. Sometimes you got to dig a little deeper. The issue may not be what it seems. Now, I want to talk about your commencement speech. I watched your commencement speech you gave to a graduating class in 2016, and you mentioned having been incorrectly labeled as a poor learner early in life by some of your teachers. You've certainly overcome those labels. When I listened to that speech, I immediately thought, though, of how unhelpful some of the labels are in our community association context. So let me throw out some of those labels: condo commando, crazy owner, uncaring manager. All of these are labels that have been used in far too many condos and HOAs. So how do we get away from those labels and address issues that divide people on a particular matter more productively?
I know about that label. I like to tell a story. When I was in second grade, my penmanship's terrible. My penmanship's so bad.
So was mine, actually.
Really?
Yeah, like a pharmacist. Yep.
Yeah, my penmanship's so bad that I write my children's thank you cards for them, and they actually think, from birthdays, and I actually think that it's from my children. I spent all weekend one time doing like the trace letter A, letter B, letter C, right? Doing that for school. And my mom I did this over the weekend, and my mom gets a call on a Monday, and they're like, "Miss Ayoub, your son turned in something and he's cheating." And my sister's 4 years older than me. And they were like, "I believe his sister did this work for him." My parents were like, "Oh my gosh." Right. But that's the whole thing about labeling. And what to be mindful of and use that example is we label someone, and no matter what they do, we view them in that lens. So I was a poor learner. I wasn't a good student. So no matter what I did, the lenses that someone's going to wear and see me through is that I'm not capable of doing that. So when we look at people and we're over here saying condo commando or whatever these terms are that you're using, that person could be very genuinely kind and doing everything out of the goodness of their hearts. But somehow, somewhere, someone labeled them as something, and that follows them. It's the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Would you like to be called a condo commando? Because you're going to lack credibility with everything that you do, because people are going to see you through those lenses. And so we got to see ourselves as perfectly imperfect human beings that make mistakes. And our actions speak louder than words. Let somebody maybe prove you otherwise. But till then, give them the benefit of the doubt. Give them some grace.
You see that I conveniently left off labels for attorneys, but we get labeled. Nice. But we get labeled as well. I mean, listen, I think when I've gone out to membership meetings, sometimes the members will feel as if the community association attorney is there representing the board members personally. And that's not the case. We represent the association. So people will stand up and say, "You represent me, you're my attorney." And if they're having a difference of opinion with the board, that can become a very heated conversation. The reality is, as community association attorneys, we do represent the association, but with any corporation, you take direction from the board of directors. I think the problem with labels, and you articulated it beautifully, is that once we've decided somebody is something or has a certain perspective, we miss out on the message. Whether the message is intended to be a positive one for the person who's doing the labeling, at that point, they're not listening to the message. They've already labeled you. You've been put into a box, into a category, and you're not getting out of it.
Yeah.
Pretty much not the place you want to be. I want to circle back, Chris, because I do think it's important to point out that not everybody who's suffering from a mental health crisis poses a danger to others. So often there's this linkage between odd behavior and risk. This gets very complicated and very nuanced because sometimes there is a risk between that behavior, particularly if there's been threats made, and boards have to act on that. You said it earlier, ignoring the problem is not going to go away. But remember, we can label people too. So we could automatically label somebody who's experiencing a mental health challenge as being a physical risk when in fact that's not the case. So we really have to dig into, is the person a risk to himself or herself? Is the person a risk to others? Or is the person just not obeying rules? These are, different evaluation. Do you have any training for your managers or your board members on how to understand the difference between these risks? Because the stakes can be high if they get it wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that this is a very evolutionary topic as society is kind of migrating, and some of these with the pandemic and drug abuse and alcohol abuse and all of those things that we have out there. I don't think there's enough training that we can do on this. It's a very real, when we start talking about customer service, has been all about how do we make this right with our clients? But then now we have this whole different element where all of a sudden it's not about making it right. Someone's feeling threatened, and being able to I really think that we need as an industry do more cross collaboration with management companies, lawyers, boards of directors. CAI has some good stuff that's on it, but I don't even think we're scraping the surface with it yet. I do think that this is something that I know we could do a much better job of, and that's why we have a lot of room for improvement as an industry.
I'm seeing a collaboration between our companies in the future on this, Chris, because listen, yeah. I agree with you. There are times when I have felt that sending a legal demand letter to somebody who has not exhibited any real threatening behavior, they're just violating things, in the absence of a conversation, can make that person spiral out of control, can ratchet it up. And then there's other times, for instance, there's a case out of DC years ago where a tenant went into the management office and said, hey, this resident is stalking me. And the manager said, didn't find that to be credible. That person wound up getting stabbed, attacked, and sued the management company and the board. I've always recommended in my management agreements that there is an affirmative duty on the part of the manager to report any threats within 24 hours to the board, any threats, and then let the board decide in consultation with legal counsel whether or not it's credible. So that's been one of the things that grew out of that DC case for me. You really have to decide, is sending the letter, is getting the lawyer involved going to ratchet things up? Or is it absolutely essential? If we don't take any steps, other bad things are going to happen. It really requires some training.
It does. And it's not a if-then statement, right? There's plenty of things that are black and white that if this happens, then you do this. But to your point, not every situation is the same. And is something going to be a trigger that's going to cause something for someone to spiral out of control? And understanding the context behind it, it's usually not just someone gets a letter and they spiral out of control. When folks start doing digging, there was a lot of buildup behind that dam before the water kind of came over.
But there's a real hesitation to communicating in these shared ownership communities. I don't know if you see it, Chris, but rather than talking to the neighbor, they're going to contact the manager or the board and say, hey, do something about this. And again, I think you need to know who your neighbor is, because if Hatfields and the McCoys, probably having that conversation is not a good idea. But I do think, Chris, that nowadays the default position for most people is that whatever is being done or said is coming from a place of bad intentions. If we could switch that and say our default position is what's being done or said is coming from a place of good intentions, I just think that would have a profound impact. Look, there are people with bad intentions. There are people with agendas that are hurtful. But if that's our default position, it's very hard to have those friendly, neighborly, communications and to be able to resolve problems. Many of these problems could be resolved if we just had a different mindset.
I completely agree. The best thing we can do is to continue to have this type of discussion, inspire people and be an example, because every day it's getting darker and darker. The darkness is overshadowing the light right now, and the light will outshine the darkness. No question about it. It's a matter of time.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about our ability to change direction here?
There needs to be a lot better examples of people who are in the spotlight and people who have platforms to be the light, if you will, before that will change. how we market the world. Golly, all of a sudden, when I get that Corvette, I'm going to be happy. When I get that big house, I'm going to be happy. When I get that pay raise, when I can change my title on LinkedIn, I'm set. Hey, I've chased that carrot dangling in front of me. It is an empty, dark place, but the light will overcome the darkness. It will.
God, I hope you're right. Maybe some of our celebrities and icons will come out and say, tried all that. It wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And as more and more of them come out about their mental health challenges.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now.
Well, it's funny. I wanted to circle back because you mentioned a little bit of your regimen. What do you think are the basics of maintaining mental health?
It's living your life eyes open. When you're living in a world in which you have something that's numbing you, whether it's THC or alcohol or prescription medications, you're not really awake. We got to wake up and realize life is a series of habits. So we need to change our habits. So we need to exercise a little bit more. Everyone's, it's too painful to go run 5 miles. Don't go run 5 miles. Put your tennis shoes on and just go walk down the street. Go get some sun. It's amazing how good you're going to feel. And please don't be that guy or girl that's like, I haven't worked out in like 6 years, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go squat 200 and something pounds and I'm going to go run 5 miles. And then guess what? You're not going to be able to walk for 3 days. You don't even want to work out.
You can't sustain it. You can't sustain it. But for our developers listening out there, you made a really good point. I think during the pandemic when we had shutdowns, my family and I, we rode bikes, we walked every day. It was really centering. For our developers listening, it's important when you're building these communities to have some emphasis on how people are actually going to live in these communities. I know the goal is to build them and sell them, but having that park where people can walk their dogs or walk around and have a path for people to walk on, having perhaps, adequate exercise facilities and maybe even a meditation room. One of my favorite clients has a phenomenal meditation floor that's got outdoors and it's beautiful. So those are the things that would be wonderful if our developers would start emphasizing long-term mental health too.
I love it. Also with that is start with telling yourself something nice about who you are. Something nice about yourself. Start off with writing down a couple things you want to accomplish in a day and actually accomplishing them.
So, Chris, I'm going to be vulnerable. I sometimes put stuff on I'm a big list person, but sometimes I put stuff I know that I've already accomplished 5 minutes ago on my to-do list. So I can cross it off. Is that bad?
Not bad at all because you got something done that was important to the day and you need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I want to look at it. I just did it, so I write it down sometimes. I mean, look, I've got voluminous to-do list, but to your point, you're right. My to-do list isn't write the next great American novel. It's, finish this project at work or, take care of this personal agenda item.
I like it. And if you're not doing that, then you're selling yourself short.
To your other point, though, I think what's important to remember is that everything is temporary. So you're feeling great. That's great, but it's going to change. You're feeling terrible. That's awful, but it's going to change. And I think sometimes people get really mired in a mental health crisis because they just don't see that the situation's going to change. With the COVID pandemic, it's, as you can imagine, has been a real challenge dealing with, at least from an association attorney's perspective, trying to guide boards on the rules they should be passing, the safety protocols they should be enforcing. But one thing that I've tried to drive home is this isn't going to last forever, we hope. So these safety protocols will change over time. I hope there will be a day in the near future where we'll be able to say we defeated this thing. But I think people have to understand that our lives are fluid. Things change. Things change inside of us and they change externally as well.
One of my favorite Bible verses is where James talk about blessed is, she who endures during times of trials and tribulations. Life isn't meant to be easy for us. We're supposed to have our challenges. I mean, we'd be in heaven if there was no challenges. And so being able to have the wisdom to navigate through the tough times. And, I haven't arrived. It's taken me a long time to realize, just even answer the question, who am I? That's important. Like, this is the whole concept of who am I? And then try to do it without saying what your job is or who you're the parent of. You have to know who you are. And I think all too often we just get away from. So
knowing who you are, being able to ask those questions. But, I think for some people, it's very uncomfortable to dig that deep, to dig that deep about themselves, and maybe even to dig that deep about other larger issues that we're facing as a society right now. It just seems like a perfect storm that we're all collectively going through. And I think the advice you've given today is going to be useful to the people who are listening and are willing to try to consider it. So when I'm going through challenges at work or challenges when I'm in a complicated legal battle on behalf of a client, I'm going to show you who I turn to. It's my Winston Churchill, A Collection of Wit and Wisdom, the quotable Winston Churchill.
My favorite.
I think of this guy and I think of what he did during World War II, protecting a little island that was being battered. And I think, okay, you know what? You can get through this. That's why I was so happy to have you on the podcast because, as a combat veteran who's gone through as much as you've gone through, it's just very inspirational to hear your philosophy on mental health. Last question. I understand there's a sword hanging in the Pentagon with your name on it.
So you're talking about World War II and Winston Churchill. So Great Britain wanted to recognize the United States for their contribution, military service, and being an ally. They wanted to thank the Air Force, and so they wanted to come up with an award. So they came up with the award naming the number one officer candidate in any given year for the Air Force. And I look at academics, athletics, military. It's a bunch of different variables, right? So I won in 2003. I won it at the Air Force Academy level. There's 4,000 to 4,500 cadets at the Air Force Academy. And then I went on and competed nationally, and out of a pool of about 20,000 folks, right? I was ranked number one. And then I went to the Oval Office, then President George W. Bush. That was March of 2004. And so to honor the United States, they put this award together. And it's a beautiful sword at the Pentagon. And my name's on it now. So.
Not bad for a kid who was labeled a underperformer or poor learner back in grade school. Not bad, Chris. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a review so more people can take it to the board. And visit takeittotheboard.com for more information.